Hey folks, this is Ben Gessel. So this is the third part of my thoughts here about Harry Potter and J.K. Rowling, which I'm going to tie in on some level with Disney here in just a sec. So I went into a lot more detail about the Emma Watson, Hermione Granger stuff in the last video. I'm going to try to focus a bit more on now some other things about this whole thing. Now, still to this day, it's a huge hit. People still want to see Harry Potter stuff. They'll still want to. There's a theme park that everybody goes to. There's the Grindelwald movie that came out. I haven't seen it yet. Still, some other kinds of things that J.K. Rowling's been up to, and I think she could just keep still sticking with this whole Harry Potter world throughout the rest of her life, along with some other stuff she wants to do. But she can just stick with this, and she'll be good. Seriously, but yeah. So, we're talking about, I mentioned some of my thoughts, big thoughts about Harry Potter already, and to me, much of the Harry Potter world, it's become such a big thing. There's so many things going on with different characters in this world that honestly, I think that really you should make it like a Star Wars thing, but by all means, don't treat it like you've treated the Star Wars universe, right? Which still exists in my mind. I know what real I meant Star Wars. That's what I meant. I didn't mean Star Trek. Star Trek is the same thing. Okay, so Star Wars existed as the way Star Wars was earlier, before Disney bought it, is the way I still see Star Wars. I meant to say don't treat the Harry Potter world like you treated the Star Wars world when Disney bought Star Wars. But that's what I meant. But there's so much going for it. There's so many things going on with different characters that you could make books and books and books and books and books like to infinity. There's so much you can do, and I think it's great. I think you should do that. I think that there should be many books made even after J.K. Rowling dies. I think it's just wonderful, That being said, let's get into some other stuff here in a bit. First, my aesthetic thoughts about Harry Potter and Disney, and then we'll get to some other stuff. I mentioned already I love the secret passageway things. With Disney now, my favorite things about Disney movies when I was younger were talked about my love of England and Germany and stuff in Northern Europe. It's similar with Disney. I love the fact that Disney had so much of a European, Walt Disney had so much interest in Northern European, people and cultures and fairy tales, and a lot of people get the wrong idea still and whatever about that whole thing. I think I mentioned videos about this before. But in addition to the interest in Northern Europe and fairy tales and things, we're also talking about more conservative values that Disney obviously was showing in fairy tales, it mirrored. Obviously, we're talking about Grimm's fairy tales in Germany and England and stuff. We're talking about values that are very Christian or pagan, but they're at their heart of hearts. It's the spirit of these fairy tales. It's the old culture, right? It's the old cultures in Europe. It's not the modern stuff. It's the old stuff that we like a lot more, because to me, it's like the authentic, old Germany or the old Denmark or the old England, right? And that's what I loved as a boy. I wanted more of it, but you felt it in the fairy tales. These fairy tales have been around for a long, long time, and there's fairy tales in Russia and Poland, the same deal. It's the parent culture. It's the old culture. It's the real stuff. It's what people valued from these countries. It's what how they felt about things, their beliefs, their fears, right? You see it all in their fairy tales, and that's what I loved. It was very dear to my heart still. It very much is. It always is. It influences the music I write, all that stuff. Very much so. So it's not just Northern Europe, of course, but we're talking about old Disney. We're talking primarily about Europe, because we know that in the 90s and on, but especially the 90s, there was a lot more of a, well, it became less Eurocentric for various reasons, and that's fine. That's cool. But the only thing about some of these more, well, though it's still in the era of the Eisner Disney, which is different than the Disney in the last decade or two, somewhat. But in the Eisner era, where you were getting into other stuff more, other cultures, the only thing I would add is sometimes you had a sassier attitude. That was all it amounted to, mainly for like some of those kinds of that era of Disney movies. And then in more recent times, Disney's become something completely different, and you don't have to talk about that too much. But it's you know, it goes without saying, it's the old Disney as well as it could take some of the Eisner Disney, sure. But it's the old Mickey Mouse cartoons. It's Goofy, it's Donald Duck, and that's real Disney. And the way they treated a lot of fairy tales was great. And Bedknobs and Broomsticks, and The Parent Trap, and all those movies, and The Shaggy Dog, and all that stuff is great, awesome. It's just, I love it. I love it to death. And conservative values, absolutely. You know, that was, my family loves it. I love it. You know, it's always been, to me, it's always felt like a warm, fuzzy blanket. There's nothing wrong with any of that stuff. But it is conservative values. It is, a lot of it might seem objectionable to some folks, that are especially liberal these days. But, or, you know, I've heard my brother's wife talking about a lot of stuff that was not so great about old Disney stuff. What I'm not talking about the Song of the South, or the certain cartoons that are especially racist. I'm not talking about that stuff at all. That's a different thing. That's a different thing. It's a different element that, you know, everybody forgets. Not many people understand just how, by our standards, would be racist. But many people, I know I made a video about this. Not many people really truly understand how, especially black folks, were not valued at all by everybody, not just Disney. It was like all of white America, or most of anybody who was white in the 1800s or early 1900s, or first half of the century of 1900s. So there's a minority of people that stood up for black people, or treated them with more respect, or just whatever, everyday respect. It was a minority. It was not the majority. It was a minority. So most people in cartoons and media were very disparaging, not just toward black people, but for Asians and other people too. Sure, absolutely. And so many people these days, so everything kind of turned on its head in the civil rights era and the hippie era in the United States. This is all United States culture. Everything turned on its head, and I think much of it for the right reasons. But there were some negative things that happened as well. So I can't say it was all good. But I liked how, you know, if you were not white, it was great to be treated better, certainly. But yeah, but so many people these days don't understand that. They just don't understand that was the way things were before World War II, before 1950 or so, and so especially before the Civil Rights era. So that all being said, so the way that the aesthetics of the old Disney stuff I liked, but I'm not talking about, again, those nutty cartoons that you see about Black Sambo guy or whatever. That's not what I'm talking about at all. So I'm talking about getting back to Harry Potter in a bit, and just taking a brief segue into Disney. I've always liked it when you have not only the landscape of movies being like beautiful, or, you know, green and intriguing, and the colorful element, the fantasy element of, you know, castles and old places in, like, say, Britain. But I also like it when you have characters that are themselves much more enjoyable to get to know. And unfortunately for Harry Potter, as I mentioned before, I was never really into the romantic end of things so much. I just didn't really, no. The girl element of Harry Potter things just never something I really was super into. Somewhat, a little bit, but not really. I was about the Marauders map and the Weasleys in general, and again, Hermione and Ron and Harry and Hagrid and his dog and the whole dynamic, right? Getting away with things and you know breaking the rules and exploring the Forbidden Forest and um yeah, and I thought that was great. It was very more my element of what I like in fantasy. Um, a lot of that stuff. It's just kind of mysterious and fun and curiosity provoking. I liked, for instance, in Alice in Wonderland when it seemed like a dream. You were pretty sure it was a dream, but it was vivid enough that you're like, oh, maybe this is really happening. Um, but when the Disney treatment of Alice in Wonderland, when they had that black background and everything that was colorful was like glowing, like luminescent, and Alice would be confused and maybe really really despairing and like she never thought she'd get home and crying and it was just there. It was not too long after The Wizard of Oz with Julie Garland, where she played Dorothy. I could see a similarity kind of in how girls, female characters were in movies, and I thought it was great. It was awesome, but I know everybody wants to treat. There's so much talk about Alice in Wonderland and Wizard of Oz feminism. I just think it's just been analyzed to death, and so I don't want to talk about that in this video, which I probably have in the past, but on some level. But basically, I loved with the Cheshire Cat and everything. It was just so. It was like just a nice break from your life. Where you could just kind of sink your teeth into these really subconsciously meaningful kinds of scenes and characters. And it wasn't threatening so much. So it was like it was very easy to kind of feel more at ease and peaceful, which really can kind of just make the whole experience of a movie that has that feeling so much more meaningful. You can just get more into it, especially if you're not really as much into the adrenaline thing so much in movies. So that being said, with Harry Potter again, what I really liked was when they had that secret passage to like Hogsmeade, and when Harry, was treated like crap by his foster family or whatever, but so him trying to get to Hogsmeade and just have a butterbeer with Ron and Hermione, and just that we know what it's like as kids in school when we just don't get to have the good times, right? Or we don't get the tasty candy, or we don't get to go to all the fun shops. We don't get to hang out with our friends. We're grounded or something. We all understand what that's like on some level. And so I definitely love that aspect of Harry Potter. That was awesome. I mean, loved it. But so this all being said, I just have to say, again, there are times when I feel like I wanted Harry Potter to go certain directions that maybe just didn't go. And whether we're talking about the attractiveness or the femininity of its female characters, or just not having enough of the characters that I thought would be more beautiful or more whatever charming or whatever you want to say about female characters, it just didn't do it for me that way. So I could only get into that aspect so much. Regarding Harry Potter, it's true, I've mentioned this in other videos, I very much liked the character of Alice in Alice in Wonderland. And obviously the different movies have treated Alice as either a girl or a teenager or a young woman. And so obviously the way you feel about Alice is going to change a bit depending on the treatment of how old is Alice in these movies. Obviously Alice in the Disney version was played by last name of Beauchamp, Catherine Beauchamp, and she was probably in her late teens, or even, I can't remember if she was college age or late teens, but she was certainly not a girl. And so you hear this young woman, as her voice, and she had a higher voice, but the way they drew Alice was more like the way Catherine Beauchamp looked. Very pretty English, French English. Well, basically, blondish hair, long blonde, and very nice voice. But polite and everything. Very much as a boy, 5-year-old boy, seeing this for the first time when I was a boy, I just thought the world of Catherine Beauchamp. Just like the same deal with Haley Mills in the Parent Trap and those kinds of movies. I just sunk my teeth into their characters. So because they were so charming. They were so, as a boy, I thought they were just the greatest. They were the greatest, ladies. And I mentioned this before. Again, in other videos. I just was, very smitten by how kind and nice they were. For me, they were like examples of how women should be or ought to be more like on some level. And I mentioned this is old Disney. This is old Disney. This is how, and this is the kinds of things I like about old Disney. And this is the kind of stuff that many people like me that are more conservative, whether they're Christian or LDS or whatever, or other folks. This is what we tend to enjoy more. This is what we tend to look for, even in young women or women that we want to date and marry. It's no mistake. It's all related. It's all should be very plain and apparent. It's not that liberal junk. It's not that stuff at all. Even though some liberal ideas of women are still not terrible, it's just it's not the same. It's different. No. So yeah, absolutely. So I loved Walt Disney's take on Alice. I had the same, very similar, the same, tastes in that regard. And so, again, there's been many other Alice in Wonderland productions, and I mentioned this is all going to get back to Harry Potter. I promise. You just, you had the 1972 British version of Alice in Wonderland with, again, what's her name? I can't remember everybody's names, but it was live actors or actors in costumes, and the British thing is the color schemes were different than Disney, obviously, so they used a lot more pastels and whites and grays and muted colors compared to the vivid, colors and the black background of Disney treatment. And so, so if you have a more of a teenage Alice or young woman treatment, you can start to notice things like how pretty they are without feeling like you're a weirdo. But, obviously, it's just media, folks. I'm not going to get into this too much in this video. But the thing is that you also have treatments of Alice in Wonderland where she was played by a real life girl, like 7 or 9 years old. There's the Natalie Gregory version in 1985, where we're that's so cute, right? She's more of a cutie, right? A little cutesy. Give her a little cookie or something, right? Give her, But it was like, that's Natalie Gregory, and then you had some other. There's so many versions of Alice in Wonderland. It's so. Again, if you see a Alice in Wonderland movie where she's a little girl, you're going to want to, make sure she's okay. You want to protect her from the big bad monsters, and you want, take. It's so like, if she ever is emotional or crying, you just want to give her a hug, and you're like, it's gonna be okay, and you want to take her home, right? You want to protect her from the big bad monsters, anything that's scary. And if she's a young woman, teenager, or especially young women in the 20s more, then you're like, that's different. That's like, maybe you're thinking, wow, man, whoa. Yeah, so it's just different. And we get some ambiguity from Alice in Wonderland anyway, because of the original nature of the story itself, where, and again, you guys can get into that all you want to and think of how you want to of Lewis Carroll. I still like the man. I don't think he's a weirdo. It's okay if you think he is a weirdo. I just know that. Anyway, that's beyond the scope of this particular video, and I mentioned things about this before, but Lewis Carroll being how he was. I'm just going to put it this way: that Alice did have a little bit of an ambiguity regarding is this a little girl we're talking about? Is this more of a teenager, young woman? And yeah, so I know we're talking generally more about a little girl, but this all being said, taking this back to Harry Potter, again, so much of what I'm thinking about with Alice in Wonderland also has to do with the aesthetics of it, with the imaginative qualities of Alice in Wonderland. Get back to Harry Potter. It's I always liked it when I felt like I was about to read something or I was getting into something that felt more immersive, that felt like these characters were all very unique and had all these different desires that we didn't always know about. Dobby and Creature, the house elves, to the nature of Sirius Black's house. When the Order of the Phoenix movie was going on, that they had that room with all the different kinds of rooms they had everywhere. The room where they had the branching black family tree, the way that and then they had like the rooms at the Ministry of Magic with all the orbs or the balls with the prophecies in them. And I didn't want any to break because I didn't know what they were. But you had that scene where all those balls were smashing or breaking when Lucius was after Harry Potter for all that stuff. And then but it was all so varied. It was all part of it. All fit in. Somehow it was all interesting that way. And so I think when Harry Potter was all done with, when all the movies were made, all the books were made, I was a little bummed. Sure, I was a little sad. I was like, oh man. So, but with the stuff that's come out after Harry Potter, the 7 books, I suppose I haven't really seen them because it's not just because I'm a little bit older now. It's more because, like, why? There's still some interest, but it's just. Gellert Grindelwald. Okay, is this his name? Gellert Grindelwald. It's kind of like it's all the little pieces now. It's like you've had the main pizza or you've had the main course. Now, why would you want to have all the little crumbs or all the little scraps of leftovers? So, other movies that J.K. Rowling needs to make or other books, they ought to have as much substance as Harry Potter. And they can still be in the Potter world, but they should involve more characters, interactions. For instance, we all want to see a movie, I think, involving James and Lily Potter. James and Lily Potter, and James's friends with the Marauders map, Sirius Black, and the guy that turned into a werewolf, and then Snape, Severus Snape. We want to see that stuff, and we want to see how all that stuff went down. And if J.K. Rowling wrote some books about that, I know she will. If she has any sense, she will. We're going to want to see those movies. That's like the prequels, right? You can say that the Star Wars prequels were not as good as the originals, and yeah, I know it. Yeah, I agree. And so you might think, that then these movies about Harry Potter's parents and everybody in his age, that generation before, that's not going to be as good because it's the prequels. Well. And we know already so much what happened. It's like there's not as much. We already know what's going to happen, But there's probably a lot of things that we don't know. There's probably a lot of things that would be really fun to watch. I think a lot of people would want to see something like that. I think there's a lot of things that, again, would be very fun to watch. So yeah, I mean, I'd see that stuff, sure. I would rather see something like that than something about Gellert Grindelwald, who was a very powerful wizard, played by, what's his name? Pirates of the Caribbean guy. I don't know. Just brain freeze right now. I can't think of Johnny Depp. It's fine. I love Johnny Depp. I'm sure I'll see the movie sometime. But it just doesn't have as much of a... It's not something, if I felt like I was entering a universe with a completely different story, completely different world, completely different thing, it had all new characters, all that stuff. It was fantasy. It was really awesome. I say, oh, this is a new thing. I go see it, and I treated it like a new thing, and I'd be really curious. I'd be really curious about everything. And so obviously, a lot of these movies that are in the Potter universe are probably not going to be as initially curiosity provoking as the first stuff, right? Original Seven, but there's no guarantee that's going to be the case. There's so many things that we still don't know that it would still be. I think there's still a lot of things that would be very curiosity provoking about that whole thing. We don't have to have a big showdown of good versus evil, but there might be some very frightening things. We might be looking forward to seeing those very frightening things, or mysterious things, or funny things, or whatever. All these characters that were in Harry Potter, like nearly Headless Nick and that girl that would haunt the bathrooms and Moaning Myrtle or whatever. Seeing all these characters when they were alive would be awesome. It'd be great. We would think, oh, we don't want to see them because we like them to be more how they were in Harry Potter. Well, I don't know. Me personally, I would go see a movie I'd read a book or I'd see a movie that got into these characters more, sure. Because we liked them, or we thought they were funny, or we got into them more when we were reading Harry Potter stuff. So I think it would work. I think it really would. I don't know if it'd be as big as the original Harry Potter, but I think it would be pretty big. Same thing with the Star Wars thing. We just critique Hayden Christensen's acting, but I don't think we should be so hard on Hayden. I think he was respectable. It's fine. Just not quite in the level of maybe Harrison Ford. I don't know. He's younger guy. Anyway, so that's about what I wanted to say about Harry Potter. I can't emphasize, though, enough of how much I love England, is the landscape and its old culture. Old culture, not the modern culture, but the old culture. And, it's like, anyway. And, yeah, I mean, I'm sure I'll make another video about Harry Potter stuff in the future. But last thing I wanted to say, maybe, about all this stuff is that there are some elements that, for me, cross over with very, very readily with other fantasy worlds or books or universes or whatever. And the thing is that, some things I really like a lot. And I love the mysterious forest thing. When it's dark and you're in a forest and has a foresty feel, which is great, but it's also, you might have a well, there might be a lot of unexpected things that might happen. So I like it when you have settings and scenery where it's inviting on some level, it draws you in, but at the same time it might be not always, especially. You might have a variety of different. Well, what I'm trying to say, different landscapes, different settings in video games or movies or books, right? Depending on the lighting, depending on the colors, will suggest different things to your reader or your player or your viewer regarding what's likely to happen. And what it doesn't, maybe it doesn't always happen the way you expect things to happen, depending on, but it can suggest that. So it's meaningful, right? Meaningful, or basically settings you can kind of get into, right? You can enjoy. There's just some settings I enjoy visually and whatever, like, and this is the stuff that's like fuel for my imagination. The dark forests are one of those things, right? So anyway, that's about it for Harry Potter and all my thoughts in this regard. Leave your thoughts and comments below. Catch you guys later. Take care. Bye.